33% of Rock County's population came from German ancestry, according to the census of 2000. From 1850 to 1950, more immigrants came to Wisconsin from Germany than any other country. Follow the Rock River from Janesville, north 46 miles, and you'll find what was once a mecca for Germans who contributed important social policies to America, such as Social Security and kindergarten. The story is told in a British documentary called Destination America.
American railroad companies encouraged immigration, and their tracks pushed the frontier further west. Behind the frontier came the Germans. In 1854 alone, Germans made up half of all immigrants to America. Few of these were frontiersmen. The majority of them came for economic reasons. The area in and around Milwaukee became very much a German settlement. Since then, nearby towns like Watertown have become prosperous under German influence.
It's predominantly middle class. We do have some poor people, but not too many. And there are some quite wealthy people, but when you think of the wealth out in New York and Florida and places like that, we don't have that kind of wealth.
One of my friends put it quite well when she said, "This is the eatingest town I ever did see." The Germans of that day, and to some extent those who are present-day German descent, were very well nourished. The German people are a thrifty people. They are savers, they're organized, they're practical.
There's a phenomenon which I think is characteristic of the German community back in Germany and earlier Europe, and to some extent some of the other clans of people, and that is a withdrawal type, where groups of people find themselves uncomfortable trying to deal with the phenomenon of the total society and make themselves more comfortable by withdrawing into a very narrow circle.
Teenagers on their bikes are a familiar sight as they beat up the main street. Watertown's German heritage doesn't affect the young very much. It's in the well-manicured side streets that the past still means something.
When my grandmother was 13, she decided she wanted to come to America to live. Everybody was going to America in those days anyway, so she said, "I want to go to America, that's going to be my country." And she insisted that her family come along, and she said, "If they don't come," she said, "I'm going alone." And she finally convinced them to go. And they came over in steerage.
In one of the letters that my grandfather received from one of his friends when he had made the decision to leave, that famous line of Goethe's was quoted, "America, du hast es besser." Everything's better in America. This was the land of opportunity, where all of the social and political and religious ideals could be fulfilled. The things that had been frustrated in Europe could be realized over on this side of the Atlantic. So many of these people came with very real goals and hopes. Certainly they found the reality of life in America a good deal less congenial than they'd hoped, but their hopes perhaps were excessive.
My grandfather was a tinsmith, and then he started the store, which was just a small tin shop. Then after a while it expanded and went into a quite large hardware store. Now it's 3 stores in one.
On the whole, the Germans were better educated than most other immigrant groups. Many of them also brought some capital with them. They set up small businesses and became solid Midwestern citizens. Watertown's Germans were not just businessmen. They were teachers, writers, lawyers, and political refugees from the failed liberal revolution of 1848 in Germany. They met at the Buena Vista Tavern. These liberals, and even more socialists, helped to create a reforming tradition in America which survives to this day.
The first unemployment compensation law was written right here in Wisconsin. The first federal Social Security law was written by a professor at the University of Wisconsin, an economist who was born and grew up in Watertown. He was a classmate at Northwestern College of my father's. The first administrator of this program during his first 20 years after it was enacted during the Roosevelt years was a man from Wisconsin with another good German name. One of the aspects of the German impact on Wisconsin, the impact at least of the 48ers, was an enormously high value placed on education as such. In Watertown itself, there is, of course, the first kindergarten in America, founded by Margareta Meyer Schurz, the wife of Karl Schurz, herself a student of Friedrich Froebel, the great educational reformer in Germany. In the town of Watertown, the first free textbooks provided by a school system to the children of any school in America were voted back in the 1870s by a school board of which, incidentally, Emil Gabler was a member. Emil Gabler, my great-grandfather, was the organizer and the conductor of a men's chorus in Watertown, the so-called Concordia Society, and organized and participated in many so-called Sängerfeste, these singing competitions among male choruses from all over the Middle West. So that this was a strong element in the life of Watertown, a town of that size, as well as of Milwaukee, where so many things went on, and where in the late 19th century, German publication in the German language, German theater, and of course, above all, music were so important, such important parts of the life of the community.
From pioneer farm to big city, the Germans softened the hard edges of early American culture. They thought they could be both German and American forever. And they could, for a time. The First World War destroyed the German community in America. At first, many Germans tried to keep America neutral. Later, they were forced to choose between the old country and the new. To prove their loyalty, they had to fight their brothers. A traumatic experience, and one from which they never recovered.
They were profoundly affected by the First World War. The whole burgeoning German culture that was here, the German theater, the use of German in the schools, German names were completely, almost completely eradicated. And this, among older Germans, has left a kind of a sad feeling.
There was a good deal of public hostility directed toward Germans, with the result that people with German names made special efforts to buy more Liberty bonds than they might have otherwise.
In the Second World War, however, the attitude was different. For the most part, the American Germans were very violently opposed to Hitler, partly because they saw their own culture and their own people being destroyed by Hitler inside of Germany. So there wasn't the same tension that existed there.
After 2 world wars, the German community has a low, almost non-existent profile. Milwaukee once claimed to be the cultural center of German America. Today, it is famous for beer and bratwurst.